different
Right.
upbringings. I mean, as you said before, the Native Americans who had lived there before, they didn't have access. They hadn't domesticated many animals or horses, and they didn't have access to the. You know,
They were for thousands of years.
that's a good question, but I think a lot of it is based on their religion, and a lot of that they respect.
Pantheism.
They respect nature. They respect.
They didn't respect nature. They hunted and fished more species to extinction per capita than any people in the history of the world. They didn't care at all.
I didn't really mean it by that in that
Okay.
sense. I think there was more of a respect towards like the physical nature.
Sorry, I just get heated because I learned this stuff in school.
No,
and then I
it's
was reading
okay.
like, wait, they fished them out of existence? We
No,
learned the
that's
Pocahontas.
okay.
They're like, wait, they didn't have the wheel? Wait, they never used horses? Everything I learned was a lie.
Yeah,
and then I had to learn about what really happened with these turf wars with a lot of the pilgrims and early settlers.
And so I think that is really, I mean, you would be able to argue that those were just like underdeveloped civilizations.
Why this?
Well,
why don't we say they didn't use the wheel?
I think that
Know this.
development is kind of however you think development should be. I mean, some people believe that spiritual development is more important than actual like material development and being able to. Sure, some people think that it's incredibly important to have access to electricity, but other people think that having it, that's really like a basis of what people's values are based on what they believe is material.
Not material.
goods.
I'll talk about rights, equal rights.
Yeah.
Rights for women. Would we both agree good things?
But
not
you can
enslaving and raping women and kids.
yes,
that wasn't their values.
Yes, but I mean,
Are some cultures better than other cultures?
I would not argue that some cultures are better than other cultures. I would argue that cultures are different.
Okay, well then we just disagree. I think that the culture that says you can't rape and scalp women is better than the culture that says you can steal women.
I would like to say that in that standpoint, that's a different. I was thinking more on the idea of like cultural values based on.
But those are cultural values. That's a big reason for the conflict, right? The big reason for the conflict is when early settlers come and they go, whoa. You don't get to enslave their children and burn these people alive.
Yeah.
And by the way, you mentioned the Mexicans. I mean, you go down there. Do you know how many conquistadors there were?
No, I don't.
And this is not a trick question.
Yeah.
I didn't know. I didn't know because I wasn't taught in college.
Sure.
I don't know about you. I was taught in college. The conquistadors came in and they conquered these people and they were brutal and they were barbaric and they wiped them out.
Yeah.
Is that what you were taught?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm just saying that's what I was taught.
Yeah.
There were about 500.
Yeah.
Do you know how many natives there were?
A lot more.
Many tens of thousands. Do you know how many tons of gold they had?
That I don't know.
Do you know how they procured said gold? By enslaving, because they had no regard for human rights whatsoever, and so they enslaved people, usually after raping and beating them and stealing their women if they were fertile enough, and they would say, okay, you have to go and get us gold, and your options are get us gold or die.
Yeah.
So, Cortez came with 500 conquistadors. Do you think you can take over an entire land? Because you went through Mexico, you went through all that in the atrocities.
Well,
do you think you can take over and conquer an entire land with 500 conquistadors? What's required is natives who were so upset because of the barbarism and how mistreated they were, they felt that they were, and they knew they were better treated by European settlers who came and they said, we're going to take our chances with the guys who have the boom boom sticks.
Yeah, I talked about that briefly earlier. I might not have talked about it in an extent because I was kind of listing things. However,
that's why I just kind of went down my list.
No, that's true. And so that is 100% true. And there were, the only thing is that
and that's
that
why
was
the
regarding
conquistador culture is better. I say it's superior.
Well, I mean, I'll agree to disagree about that, but I mean, I see what your point is. The only thing that I have to say about that is that
they were ripping out hearts of children.
So,
how can you disagree that that's an inferior culture?
I definitely.
I'm sorry, I respect you sitting down, but ripping out hearts
I don't believe
and sacrificing them. But that was a central value to the culture. How can we not say the culture that says, no, we don't rip out hearts to the sun god, and we're going to subjugate you so that you don't continue to rip out hearts to the sun god? How can you say that one culture is not better than the other? Do you believe that?
I mean, I've just never really believed that it was specifically our right to go in and say that type of thing. It's just not. I mean, I'm just not pro.
But it was their right to rip out the heart?
To be honest, if you live in that society, I guess that is. Yeah.
But the people that were born didn't get born like, oh, I'm signing up to have my heart thrown down like Apocalypto.
I think that they're.
Do you see what you're saying right now? It's unbelievable. And as a Jewish person, especially when you really understand the importance of Jews, and I believe Jews need a homeland with Israel because they had their rights completely violated for a long time.
Oh,
I mean, what do you think would happen if if right now today a Palestinian ripped the heart out of a Jewish child to sacrifice to Allah.
Well, I don't think that that would necessarily happen.
Of course it wouldn't happen.
But I'm also saying that this was, I mean, we're talking about a time that was not thousands of years ago, but it originated thousands of years ago. And
But
so
it was
these are
thousands of years
practices-
ago with the settlers too, is my point.
Yeah.
My point is, they had thousands of years, still ripping out hearts and cannibalizing. Western Europeans had thousands of years, plumbing and the wheel and horses.
Yeah.
One is better, in my opinion.
Yeah.
You don't think one is better?
It's just that I don't think that we have the right to go into other civilizations and basically just try and, sure, it might make it. I mean, I think there's something noble in saying, sure, we could try and make your life easier, but I don't think that we have the right to say, tell other people what they're doing wrong and this is what they believe in. It's a religion, and I think that bringing in Judaism into it is not, in my opinion, a very good thing. Just because I think I think that
I brought Christianity into it too. I'm saying I believe that the Jewish culture is better than the ripping out hearts culture.
I mean, I would also say that I don't really like bringing the Holocaust into things like that, just
I
because
didn't bring the Holocaust into it.
I mean, it's been brought in just before, but
Okay.
I definitely think that talking about modern day Judaism and then referring to older religions, the Mayans, which to this day still practice but do not continue with these ripping out rituals, and maybe that's because
it's impermissible.
Maybe that's because we came in and we said maybe you shouldn't do that anymore.
Right.
But at the same time, we shouldn't be saying instead you should convert to Christianity. Instead, you should convert to our religion because it's superior. I think that
Well, namely, it was because at that point, the reason we had to do it was because to ensure that people weren't being cannibalized and having their hearts ripped out, the only sort of fail-safe was you're going to put a cross next to your initial there, so we know that you've moved on from heart removal territory.
Yeah, the only thing that I think in that is that just starts the process of assimilation that still is
Great.
very prominent. You like assimilation?
Yeah, I think, as a matter of fact, that's the biggest argument against genocide against Native Americans, because most of them assimilated, and most of them assimilated because most wanted to.
I would actually think that a lot of them, and obviously I didn't live during that time, so I really can't make
I'm older than you, but I wasn't quite alive at that time either.
Yes, I'll give you that one.
But I do have some grays here in the sideburns, and it makes me sad.
But I definitely would think that fear was a reason that a lot of people assimilated, and that's a reason a lot of people assimilate today. Is
Fear of having their hearts ripped out or being cannibalized by other natives. They said, whatever is going on with these new guys who have the funny translucent skin, it's got to be better than being cannibalized and burned alive. I'm going to go with you. We gave them some fire water and let them duke it out, and then came in and picked up the pieces. And I just think it's important to understand the history of this. I agree that for example, there were some trades that went on that were terrible, and there were some acts of evil that were absolutely committed from European colonialists. I want to make it very clear that I'm not denying that.
Sure.
But in this conversation, you have presented it as though they are singularly unique while equating all cultures, but holding one culture accountable. And what I am saying, and the reason that I support Thanksgiving not only as a day, but as a concept, and I'm grateful for the settlers, is that Western European culture and the Constitution and American culture, a culture of ideas, not a people, not an ethno-state like we have with Native Americans, I believe is a wonderful thing. I'm very glad that that happened. I'm glad that the colonialists came here and that they created the kind of country that we all get to live in now. I'm okay with it. And I think they are singularly unique and responsible for ending acts of barbarism and evil across the world that the Native Americans continued and were continued in continents to the globe, many places to this day. So I don't think you can hold them accountable as being the only people who need to mourn their acts of evil. I think instead they should be praised and held accountable for the fact that they are singularly unique in stopping a lot of that.
But don't you think they should also be held accountable for the atrocities that they have?
I think no one's been held more accountable than they have.
I mean, I think that there have been, I've been to like Germany, and they have entire museums, thousands of museums. Like, it just seems like thousands of monuments, museums, talking about the Holocaust.
I think Germany sucks. I think a place.
Take that up with Germany.
I think a place that bans books because they don't want you to know about their distorted history.
I don't think they still do that.
They did it up until only, like, in the last several decades. And you can't speak freely. There's no freedom of speech in Germany, by the way. It's a hate crime if you talk about the Holocaust in unsavory terms or Nazi Germany, which I am not at all. I'm saying not at all pro-Holocaust, pro-alliance of good, pro-Israel. Okay, I'm probably more pro-Israel than anyone you know right here. But I do think that if someone is going to be a Holocaust denier, that shouldn't be a crime, and it is in Germany. I don't think that a country that has no freedom of speech and that bans books. And by the way, in the realm of history, that's pretty new. Germany went to war with the entire world twice.
Yeah. Well, Germany and allies, but yeah, I mean, that's...
Axis, yes.
Yeah.
But that gets to cultural relativism. We see them as the axis of evil. They see us as the axis of evil. Difference is, we weren't the ones gassing Jews. So I say that objectively, they were the axis of evil.
No, yes, I'm not disagreeing about that.
So now we can objectively say that gassing Jews, a Holocaust, is objectively evil, but we can't say it's objectively evil to rip out the heart of an unwilling native to sacrifice it on a pyramid.
I think that you're twisting my words a little bit.
I don't.
I mean, that's fine, but I definitely think that I just don't think that it's our right to go in and take away what we've done, and to this day is we have basically put Native Americans to the side, and we've put other ethnicities to the side, and we've basically said, if you want to live in our society, you have to assimilate yourself, and you have to learn how to become a true American.
And what does that mean?
I have literally no idea what it means to be a true American, because our country is literally based off of immigrants. And so the fact that today we don't even live in a world where we live in a world where people believe that English should be the national language, and where entire populations are, told that they aren't American enough because they speak Spanish, or because they don't, talk or look or dress like they're American, and there's no real definition.
I'll tell you what a true American is. A true American is someone who, this is the beauty of being American, and I think you conflated two things. You said we cast aside Native Americans. We didn't. Most of them assimilated, most of them willingly, some of them unwillingly. We didn't cast aside minorities. We freed them. And then we said, let's have a national day of Thanksgiving and let's celebrate this in unity. We didn't cast women aside. We gave them equal rights and then said, okay, we made progress. Progress happens in stages. I know, as opposed to the thousands of years of Native Americans. Good luck on them getting the women right to vote. So I don't think, you say we cast aside natives, we cast aside all these people. None of that is accurate. None of those things are accurate. Because, and then you say we're a nation of immigrants. Well, hold on a second, I thought we just cast immigrants aside. Neither one of those things are true. Neither one of those things are true. The truth is that unlike Native Americans who wanted an ethno-state, and by the way, an extreme example because they wanted only their tribal bloodlines to continue, and you see this in other countries across Africa, you see it across the Middle East, being a true American is subscribing to a set of ideals, and those can be found in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution and the amendments therein. That's the wonder of the United States, and that's why so many Native Americans, so many Haitians who migrate here, Italians, Jews, Polish Jews at one point, of course, Irish, have all become American because it's about subscribing to these ideals that people will traverse the entire ocean. They will brave the stormiest seas to try and willingly assimilate to American culture. And I'm going to leave it on this note. I believe that's because it is superior, and we ended evil to a degree that has not been seen before the United States. Doesn't mean that we're perfect. And that's why I love Thanksgiving. And I'm grateful that we both live here, and I'm grateful that you wore the hat. Thank you very much. Sorry, there's a little bit of water there, so I don't want your bag to get wet. What was your name?
Safa?
Safa, nice to meet you. Stephen, nice to meet you. So, yeah, I'm sure you know the topic of discussion today. I know that we're often taught, especially in schools, like Columbus Day, Thanksgiving, that it's a racist holiday. I don't agree. I think it's a wonderful holiday that should unify the nation. I think it has done me good, will do me good. I say God bless it. Happy Thanksgiving.
Okay.
And if you disagree, you're more than welcome to change my mind.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah.
So
if you want to scooch in, you can, so you don't have to lean, yeah.
So Thanksgiving is actually my favorite holiday as well.
Oh.
I think that where it gets controversial is the origin story that we're taught about it.
Sure.
That Native Americans and Pilgrims peacefully got together
Sure.
and shared a meal, and that's the story that kids are taught. That's kind of the narrative that we push, especially now that you're dressed as a pilgrim.
I appreciate that you recognize the garb. This wasn't all for naught.
But I saw a video that was made in 2015, and it's from cut.com. And it's a video that is a series of interviews that they interview Native Americans, and they ask them to describe Thanksgiving in one word, right?
Sure.
And these people say massacre, racist, false holiday,
Sure.
unpeaceful, these kinds of things. So I think if we're asking Native Americans how they feel about the holiday and that's what they're saying, then shouldn't we listen to them?
Oh, sure, you can listen to them. Doesn't mean that that's what the holiday is.
Okay, so
So before we get to, why is it your favorite holiday?
I really like cooking and eating,
Oh.
and that's what the holiday is about for me. It's about giving thanks to the people in my life. I just think that when people talk about how Thanksgiving
What are
is,
you most thankful for?
I guess being able to go home to my family and having that
good
meal.
one. Good.
Yeah, right. But I think that when people are talking about how Thanksgiving is controversial, that's what they're talking about. So
Sure.
how do you come back to that?
Well, it's incorrect.
It's incorrect. Okay.
Yeah, it's incorrect. So Thanksgiving is a celebration of in the 1620s when the Pilgrim settlers did have a meal of Thanksgiving with the I think it's pronounced Wampanoag. Is that, do you know? I want to
Yeah,
make sure I'm getting that right. Wampanoag. And they did celebrate and then had 50 years of peace after that. Now, if we want to talk about the fact that there have been some acts of barbarism committed.
Some acts.
Yeah, of course. Committed against Native Americans, and of course, committed against Native Americans from Native Americans themselves, obviously. Yeah, that happened, obviously, throughout the historical timeline, but that didn't happen at Thanksgiving. And it's interesting because, do you know when Thanksgiving was recognized officially as a federal holiday? So this is why I actually think it's the least racist holiday out there, because it's proactively a holiday designed to symbolize unity. It was Abraham Lincoln who wanted to, after the Civil War, after some, do you mind if I pause real quick? Because I don't have that kind of pull. I assume there's a hunchback up there who has an Antifa face mask. So after the Emancipation Proclamation, actually very soon after, Abraham Lincoln thought it would be a good idea to have a national holiday that symbolized unity for all Americans at this point, black Americans, white Americans, and so they did look back to that 1921 original Thanksgiving that symbolized the old world converging with the new world in 50 years of peace.
Okay.
So in looking to create a unifying holiday across all racial divides, he looked to a moment in early American history, before we were officially a country, where that happened as well. So that's why we celebrate Thanksgiving.
But even if something proactively promotes unity, if there are people who don't feel that way,
Sure.
then those people were marginalized and affected by the acts of barbarism that you said happened.
But not by Thanksgiving. Did it happen throughout history? Sure. But
yeah,
not by Thanksgiving.
But if Thanksgiving is about a moment of unity between Pilgrims and Native Americans,
Yeah.
but the rest of the time that those two peoples interacted was filled with violence and inequality,
Yeah.
then why is it just that day?
Well, a couple of things. First off, it wasn't the rest of the time.
It was most of the time.
No.
Millions of Native American people died because of colonial people coming over.
Yeah, well, it's estimated actually about 50% of Native Americans probably were
That's
wiped out.
half the people. That's
Yeah.
a lot of people.
Do you know how many of the settlers were wiped out?
They came here. They chose-
30%. So, in other words, it's not a genocide, as
It
I
is a
believe.
genocide.
Well, it's actually not a genocide by definition. I mean, I don't
They
know.
brought the disease.
Well, hold on a second, guys. Let's just keep the conversations between two folks. They did bring disease. Yeah, they did bring disease with them, and it did wipe out quite a few Native Americans. That was actually before the Thanksgiving. That's why they came back to an abandoned village. I'm sure you're aware of that because they were wiped out by diseases that largely they hadn't encountered because they hadn't domesticated most animals yet. They hadn't domesticated horses. They had no contact with horses. They were technologically very regressive. They didn't use the wheel. So what happened was there was a moment of peace there for 50 years. We had a very long portion of history that was very peaceful with Native Americans. There were multiple alliances between new settlers and Native Americans because Native Americans were warring with each other. And we do choose, though, as a holiday to celebrate this moment of unity. We choose to celebrate a positive moment. I mean, you can look at Veterans Day or Memorial Day. Well, there are horrible actions
Yeah, I
that
feel
were
the
committed.
same way about those holidays.
Oh, you do?
I do.
Same thing with 4th of July?
Yes.
Same thing with Christmas?
Yeah.
Ramadan?
I'm Muslim, yep.
Okay, because obviously slavery is still practiced across the Islamic world. So you believe that,
Okay.
no, is it not?
I mean, it's practiced across the entire world.
Not the United States.
Not just the
Well, not
Islamic
the United
world.
States,
Well,
'cause
the
you were
world
talking about
isn't the United States versus the Islamic world, is it? It's the world, the Islamic world, all different kinds of parts.
Well, in comparison to, example, the settlers in modern America. The point is, but we're not celebrating that with Ramadan, are we? We're not celebrating the Spanish Inquisition when we celebrate Christmas, right? Christians committed some horrible actions. We're not celebrating war with Native Americans when we celebrate Thanksgiving. We're celebrating a moment of peace and unity because it shows that it can be done.
I think what people want is an acknowledgement that these things happened,
I've already done that.
right?
Yeah.
Which an acknowledgement of these racist things that did happen and implying that maybe the narrative that we push isn't true, and that acknowledging that there was a disagreement and violence between these people.
Sure.
I think people just want that acknowledgement, and by flat out saying Thanksgiving is not racist, I think a better way to say, I think you could say these things did happen, and this is what it's based on, and Thanksgiving has evolved into become something else. But that doesn't mean I'm going to erase the opinions of Native Americans who suffered.
Well, who erased opinions of Native Americans who suffered? That's not what I'm doing.
By saying Thanksgiving isn't inherently racist, you are erasing that.
So in other words, unless I say that Thanksgiving is inherently racist, I am erasing the opinion of all Native Americans.
Yeah, I mean, not all, but those who feel that Thanksgiving is racist.
Well, just because
And they were the
feel that, I'm not
they were the
erasing.
marginalized group, you know, and we're pushing this narrative that they were happy to have.
At Thanksgiving they were, and for 50 years they were.
Okay.
So isn't that a good thing?
I've heard that dinner didn't happen.
What did happen?
Okay.
Not only, and I've also heard this, people try to go to the Winthrop Diaries later, in, I believe it was in the 1630s, where they had Thanksgivings during times of war against the Pequots. But that wasn't all the same thing. That was, they were thankful for during battle that they had fewer casualties. And so I think that's probably what you're conflating. They teach that often in school. I know it's kind of interesting that you say, we don't teach any of this. When I went to college, when I went to high school, I was only taught about colonialism and how awful the settlers were. I was never taught, for example, of all the warring between the tribes, of the cannibalism, of the scalping that they were doing. I was taught that they were peaceful people, and these settlers came in and stole their land, when the reality was they were warring, they were barbaric. We had many years of peace. We came in, we purchased land, we traded, we had a healthy trading relationship for a while. And
They
then
were
it did
barbaric? They lived here. This was their land.
Yeah, they were certainly barbaric.
You could argue that the colonialists were barbarians for coming in and taking their land.
I certainly would say that colonialists were barbaric compared to us today, and I would certainly say that Native Americans were barbaric in their practices compared to the colonialists.
Well, just because you don't agree and understand with something doesn't make it barbaric.
Well, I just mean, the fact that they didn't have plumbing or use the wheel.
They didn't have plumbing?
They didn't have plumbing. The Romans
That
did.
doesn't make them inferior to other people.
No, it just means it's barbaric.
Okay.
When I'm talking about barbaric, I'm talking about less evolved technologically and societally.
Okay, so definition rather than the connotation.
Yes, definition rather than the connotation.
So you
Yes.
seem to be someone who ignores connotations.
No, I don't.
Because Thanksgiving has a negative connotation in some people's eyes, but you're ignoring that connotation.
So does Christmas.
Yeah, so does Christmas.
But
And you don't talk about that either?
I do talk about Christmas. I love Christmas. I think it's wonderful and should be celebrated. I know that you've made it clear that you disagree. You don't like Christmas. You don't like Ramadan. You don't like Easter. You don't like Thanksgiving. I believe that there are certain moments throughout American history, I like 4th of July, Independence, that can be celebrated regardless of imperfections throughout history. And I think that's important to note. And I think that it's a good thing to honor and show that there can be a moment in time of peace, because we had it for 50 years. Regardless of the wars that happened before we came here.
Do
And the wars
centuries outweigh 50 years? Do you think Native Americans are thankful for being put on reservations? Like centuries after
Do you mean
Thanksgiving?
being given reservations after they lost wars? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. So you don't like any of the holidays, okay? And you say that I'm completely ignoring someone's opinion if I don't agree with them.
No, that's not what I said. I said that you're ignoring the opinion of marginalized people who the holiday affects, who the glorification of the holiday negatively affects because it erases what they say happened to them. And they were here first, so they should have a say in what the narrative's about.
Yeah, I'm not saying they can't have a say. I don't believe it's a racist holiday.
But
That's
by
not- that's
erasing
not
someone's
ignoring the
experience,
marginalization.
erasing someone's experience is a form of racism. Erasing someone's experience and reframing it in
But I didn't
a
erase anybody's
colonial-
experience.
But by saying it isn't racist, you are erasing someone's experience.
No.
Yes, you are. Inherently.
Incorrect.
Why?
That's not the definition of racism.
What's the definition of racism?
Definition of racism is believing that somebody is inferior solely based on their race.
That's prejudice. Racism is institutionalized
No.
discrimination. Yes, it is.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is.
It's not.
Yes, it is.
Well, I'm not an institution, so right now we're going with the individualized definition of
And
racism.
you're ignoring the
And you just accuse
institutionalized
me
racism.
individually of being racist.
You are
So
by.
let me ask you this. Maybe we can find some common ground here, because you said you love Thanksgiving, but you don't like the holidays. What should we do then? Right? Contact is made between two civilizations, for example. This happens, right? One has rifles and one has wheels and horses, and they engage in peace. And then there are land disputes when land was purchased. So let's just get rid of what we have right now. What would you do? You would have no Thanksgiving? What would we do? What should the United States be? I'm genuinely curious.
I think just an acknowledgement, like everyone should acknowledge what happened.
Yes, I believe everyone does.
I don't think so.
I have.
Okay.
So is it okay to acknowledge that there were acts of horrible evil and violence across all sides and still celebrate Thanksgiving for what it is? Is that okay?
It's a good question. I haven't thought that far.
Do you think that it is better to celebrate Thanksgiving and recognize a moment of unity and encourage it both with the early settlers, the early pilgrims and the Native Americans, as well as after the Civil War? Do you think it's more productive to have a day to celebrate that and encourage that kind of unity and bridging that cultural divide, or do you think it's less productive?
I think it's performative. So if something
Like
is,
virtue signaling?
yeah. So
Okay.
if something's performative, then does it really do the good that you're describing?
What good am I describing?
The unity that you're describing. Like if something is performative, then is that unity really there, or is it a performative unity which doesn't actually?
Well, I think, you just talked about Thanksgiving cooking and spending time with family. I mean, that's unity right there, right? That's prioritizing giving thanks. I mean, I think that Thanksgiving, honestly, is the least exclusive holiday. Christianity, Christianity would exclude people of
Why?
other
Because
religions.
it's secular.
Ramadan would exclude people of other religions. You can take your pick from any of the religious holidays. Thanksgiving is be thankful for what it is that you do have, whether you're a Christian, whether you're
Well, are
Buddhist,
you
whether
and
you're
your
Muslim.
family going to talk about what happened to the Native Americans?
I mean, we've talked about it all throughout my life, and I learned about it
Are
in
you
school.
going to talk about? Are you going to acknowledge it at the dinner table?
I don't know. Do I have to?
You should,
Okay.
right? No? Why not?
I didn't say I wouldn't.
You should.
Okay. Well, thank you for telling me what I should and should not do in
You're
my
welcome.
personal time.
You're welcome.
And you wouldn't think that that at all in any way is overstepping bounds or being pushy.
No,
Okay.
I don't.
All right. Well, maybe you should discuss with your family the history that you learned that wasn't accurate that you brought here to the table, and maybe you can all get an accurate account of what happened historically, and maybe discuss as well the acts of barbarism that still go on since you're Muslim across the Islamic world. Do you do that at Ramadan?
Yeah, I do actually.
You do.
I do.
So what do you discuss at Ramadan?
I discuss
Indentured
how
servitude.
I like to discuss how I think that Islam itself isn't, in certain Middle Eastern countries, how it's unequal for women.
Sure.
And as a woman, and as a Muslim woman who was raised Muslim, I believe that that's unequal, and I will acknowledge that. I like to acknowledge how Saudi Arabia, for example, is guilty of hypocrisy. You know, the royal family has so much money.
I think you're talking a lot lower right now.
Yeah, I
Is
am.
it because you're concerned about criticizing Islam?
Yeah, I guess so. Maybe
Huh.
that's just ingrained in me.
Well, that's peculiar.
Yeah, it is. Nice talking to you.
Well, I appreciate it, and I appreciate your intellectual honesty there, and that you have those discussions. By the way, I don't think you need to do that at Ramadan. I think that enjoying Ramadan for the holiday that it is and celebrating it with your family is a wonderful thing, regardless of. Listen, Muslims are imperfect, Christians are imperfect, Native Americans are certainly imperfect. If you go back to old colonial England, the Church of England are certainly imperfect, but. The Irish are certainly imperfect, but it's not my business to tell them what they need to discuss on
I
St.
think
Patrick's Day.
just when I saw that video and when I've talked to Native American people and just heard about what happened, I just have empathy for what they say,
Sure.
and it just makes it difficult to not speak up for them.
I have empathy. Here's the thing. I hope
know
you
what I
understand.
mean? Like, it's
I have
hard for
empathy
me.
as well, but you can also have empathy and understand that what people are saying is inaccurate. For example, I have a relative who's bipolar. Okay, I'm not saying Native Americans are bipolar. This is an example. I hope you understand this, right? I have a relative who's bipolar, and he will describe situations or scenarios that are not real.
And you have empathy for them.
And I have empathy for him, but it's not necessarily accurate. And so I love him, and I care about him, and I let him know that I love him and I care about him, but I don't engage on the plane, on the wavelength that what you're saying is accurate.
I don't
and
think
I can
you
have
can
empathy.
compare severe mental illness to the way people feel about
We're not supposed to use the term
historical
mental illness
injustice.
anymore.
Yes, you are.
Depending on what it is, depending on how it's defined by the DSM-5.
I'm mentally ill and I use that term.
I'm definitely mentally ill. Again, I was saying I'm not comparing bipolar to Native American. I was saying that one can have empathy without necessarily agreeing with the premise as far as its accuracy. So I can have empathy for Native Americans saying, hey, Thanksgiving to me represents all of these wars that occurred and these battles and genocide, and I can say, hey, I understand how you feel, but that's not what Thanksgiving is celebrating. And I can say, I understand how you feel, but there also wasn't mass genocide committed if you actually look at it.
There was mass genocide committed.
By definition, it wasn't genocide. There were wars, and one side won. One-sided war, mind you. But, you know, there was by that definition, there was genocide with the Mohawks and the Mohicans, the Algonquins and the Iroquois. I mean, they would cannibalize people in front of their family, right? If one of them had advanced technology, in other words, one of them were as advanced as the early settlers, this would all be Mohawk country.
Yeah, that's true.
It wasn't a peaceful culture. Everyone, right, this is human nature. And I think that taking a holiday and removing the grace from it, removing the beauty of this holiday, which is meant to symbolize unity and giving thanks, to simply re-inject what is human nature, acts of evil that occurred not during this holiday, but somewhere in the timeline, I don't think helps promote healing. I think if anything, it's divisive.
So we can agree that do we agree that the idea of Thanksgiving in your head has shifted into something else? Not a celebration of, or not an erasure of racism, but a celebration of unity.
Yes,
Is that what you think?
Thanksgiving is a celebration
of unity?
And it always has been.
But why
It's a
can't
celebration of giving
why
thanks.
can't it be a celebration of unity and like an acknowledgement of the erasure?
You can do that.
Yeah, that's
You
what
can
I'm
do that.
arguing.
Yeah. I just think that if people are going to do that, it also needs to be accurate. So if people are going to teach, for example, and I think we would both agree, right, on college campus, you guys are certainly not taught that, oh, the settlers were great and it was peaceful. That's certainly not what's being taught on campus.
I have to go to class.
Oh, okay, all right, thank you. What was your
Seems
name
like
again?
Safa. Seems like no one can change your mind. So
I appreciate it, Safa. Well, I thought that was a good conversation, no?
Now, before we continue, remember that these types of videos can only continue with your support by joining Mug Club. Join up at louderwithcreditor.com/mugclub for tons of more exclusive content, including a daily show that you don't get available on YouTube, and to ensure that videos like this will always continue to exist on YouTube itself. All right, let's get back to it. Next up, Matthew.
What's your name?
Good. Matthew, nice to meet you.
Matthew, nice to meet you. Steven. So I kind of just mentioned it to the crowd, but
That's nice. All right, let's pay me by a full minute. Jeez. Okay. Well, I'm happy. Oh, and it's recorded. All right, cool. Cool.